A reading from the book of Deuteronomy. Moses said to the people, "If only you heed the voice of the Lord your God, and keep his commandments and statutes that are written in this book of the law, when you return to the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul. For this command that I enjoin on you today is not too mysterious and remote for you. It is not up in the sky that you should say, 'And tell us of it, that we may carry it out.' Nor is it across the sea that you should say, 'Who will cross the sea to get it for us? And tell us of it, that we may carry it out.' No, it is something very near to you, already in your mouths and in your hearts. You have only to carry it out." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Colossians. Christ Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him were created all things in heaven and on earth, the visible and the invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he himself might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile all things for him, making peace by the blood of his cross through him, whether those on earth or those in heaven. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
There was a scholar of the law who stood up to test Jesus and said, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" He said in reply, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." He replied to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live." But because he wished to justify himself, he said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man fell victim to robbers as he went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. They stripped him and beat him and went off, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down that road, but when he saw him, he passed by on the opposite side. Likewise, a Levite came to the place, and when he saw him, he passed by on the opposite side. But a Samaritan traveler who came upon him was moved with compassion at the sight. He approached the victim, poured oil and wine over his wounds and bandaged them. Then he lifted him up on his own animal, took him to an inn, and cared for him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper with the instructions, "Take care of him. If you spend more than what I have given you, I shall repay you on my way back." Which of these 3, in your opinion, was neighbor to the robber's victim? He answered, "The one who treated him with mercy." Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." The Gospel of the Lord. So the answers to this morning's Jeopardy quiz all begin with the letter L, okay? Scenario, you're sitting on a porch, it's a nice summer night, and you hear an unusual bird call off in the distance, very unusual. And there's a bunch of you sitting on the porch, sort of chatting, and you hear this bird call, and you say to them, listen, right? You say to them, listen, right? And there's not much urgency to it. It's just like, check it out, okay? Listen. Next, further up the urgency scale, you are a Blue Storm coach, and you got a bunch of unruly fourth graders running in circles when they should be having basketball practice, right? And you get in the middle of the group and you do the thing, boom, 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 and you say, and this one is 2 words, you say, it starts with an L, listen up, right? And there's a little bit more urgency to that, right? So if you want to hear the bird, listen up. That's got a little bit more energy behind it. And the third one is a 3-word phrase that if Moses only knew about listen up, and he was trying to tell the people about the ways of the Lord, and you really got to pay attention to the Lord's voice, not just as you would to your basketball coach or your frustrated teacher or somebody else. But how about if Moses had the lingo at his command? Maybe he would have said, listen, ladies and gentlemen of Israel, listen way up. Listen way up. Not just listen up, but listen way up. Listen way up till you pay attention to the voice of God above all the others. Listen way up so that you're not paying attention to the distractions around you. And that call to listen way up is a call in the first reading today, and it's a call in the gospel. It's a pretty clear one. Not just to listen, to some sound in the distance or whatever else it is, or to somebody's instruction. Not just to listen up, which has a little bit more intensity to it, but to listen way up. This is what we do maybe when we're going to hear the voice of God. You see, Moses in the first reading today, he knows the people don't listen too carefully sometimes. He's been traveling with them for 40 years, and here he is at the edge of the promised land in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses' big farewell speech. And he knows that he's not going to cross over the river. He's not going to die in the land of milk and honey. He's going to die in the land of Mount Nebo, which is kind of ugly. And so he's giving the people all these instructions. And as he says at the start of today's passage, heed the voice of the Lord. In other words, listen way up. Don't heed the voices of your own bad inclinations, which you've done for 40 years. Count them, 40 years. You get some rotten inclinations and you heed those voices. You listen to those voices. Not every one of your impulses is corrupt, but enough of them are. You've made enough mistakes to know you're going to make a few more. So heed the Lord's voice. Pay a little bit less attention to your voice. And as if he's looking forward, he knows when they enter the land flowing with milk and honey, there are going to be other people there of other religions, and there's going to be something about those other religions that will appeal to the children of Israel, and they will listen to those other voices. And Moses is saying you can't do that. It's as if he looks forward and sees the influence that the cult of Baal, B-A-A-L, one of the great false gods of the region, he knows. He's been with his people for 40 years. Heed the voice of the Lord. Listen up, listen way up, and you know what it is that he's saying. Don't heed your own crummy inclinations. Don't heed the other voices of those other religions, but listen way up. Pay attention to Yahweh's voice more than any other. And in case there's any lingering doubt with these people, how do we know it's God's voice? What does Moses say? Listen, this isn't rocket science. Well, they didn't have rockets then. This isn't manna science, huh? It's not across the sea where you have to, sail over to find out what God is thinking, like you would for some of these other gods. Like go to the temples of the various gods, Astarte or Isis, or not Isis. What's the one, the water god? Not Isis. What's the name of the water god? What is it? What is it? Now that's the water god of the Romans, but there's hello, let's spend 15 minutes talking about the different denominations. Poseidon is the water god of the Romans, right? But there's the Egyptian water god. I can't believe, it's not Isis. They didn't have Isis then. Whatever it is, you don't have to go across the sea to consult with this god, nor do you have to go up to the skies, like in a spaceship. Again, Moses wouldn't have thought about that. But you know the voice of the Lord. You know it when you hear it. And you know what? Not only have you memorized it, he says it's in your mouth, meaning you can say it, you can repeat it. And it's in your heart, meaning you love it as part of your cultural identity. But you've got to heed that voice. You've got to heed that voice. Listen way up. Don't pay a lot of attention to those competing voices, because you know in your heart of hearts when this is an urge, an inclination that comes from God. When it calls you to love God and love your neighbor. Loving your neighbor, the best way to show that you love God. Listen way up, Moses is telling the people. I'm not going with you. You better listen way up. Don't just listen up. Listen way up. In the gospel today, this is Jesus on his way through Samaria. It's sometimes hard for us to appreciate just how bitter is the rivalry between the Jews and the Samaritans. Just for that little bit of background, remember the Samaritans are descended from the same people who created the Israelites. Legend has it, and the lore is, and it might be the fact, is that, remember Joseph, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph of the Technicolor Dreamcoat? Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh and Ephraim then had these descendants that became the Samaritans. The big difference between the Samaritans, two big differences between the Samaritans and the Jews, is the Samaritans believe that the holiest place in the world is Mount Gerizim, and the Jews believe that the holiest place in the world is Mount Zion, or the Temple Mount, And so they really get in big scuffles about that. And there's plenty of evidence for both to say, yeah, we have it right. The other thing is that the Samaritans say the only scripture worth heeding is the first 5 books, the Pentateuch, and the Jews say, no, there's the Pentateuch, plus there's the Psalms and the Proverbs and all the rest of it that goes into the scripture, right? But the rivalry between them, think back, remember the days of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, right? How bitter was the rivalry between the Irish Catholics and the Irish Protestants? That's like mellow compared to how much the Jews and the Samaritans hated each other, right? And it's probable that Jesus actually spoke this parable when he's going from Galilee down to Jerusalem. Samaria is the middle. It's sort of a big chunk. It's like the Oklahoma Panhandle, but round. That's a bad analogy. So, but Jesus has to pass through this area on his way down to Jerusalem, and he runs into this guy who's trying to give him a lot of trouble about what does it mean to be a good person. And Jesus is saying, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor. That's what the guy says. And Jesus is saying, right, just make it a habit, a lifetime habit, to listen way up. Always be attentive to the voice of the Lord. If you love someone that much, you're always going to be attentive to their voice. You're going to listen way, way up. And if you're listening way up to the voice of the Lord, you're going to know to treat your neighbor well. And then comes the story of the Good Samaritan. Jesus uses this to illustrate the point. Listen way up. Follow your best, most sacred, most inspired inclinations. And so for Jesus to use the Samaritan as the hero of the story is like Jesus going to Northern Ireland in a Protestant audience or a Catholic audience and saying the Protestant was the one who had it right? You can think of all sorts of other places where the rivalries are that bitter. But this is tough, and Jesus is really going out on a limb here to make the Samaritan look like the good guy to the Jews. So the first one comes down, the priest, and then the Levite, and what's the problem there? They see someone on the side of the road. They don't know if he's dead, if he's got a disease, if he's, something else is going on. They can't go near him because of ritual impurity. They can't take the risk of touching him because that would make them impure. So they cut on the other side of the street. Now, if you're too worried about your ritual purity, rather than someone who's maybe just barely alive and you can keep them alive, are you listening way up if you're most concerned about ritual purity? Do you think really that's what God has in mind when God says love your neighbor? Love your neighbor except if it's going to make your hands get dirty and then head for the hills. He doesn't say that. If you're really paying attention and really taking it to heart, love your neighbor means, yeah, that's what the voice of God says. So that matters more than just about anything in the moment. Listen way up. Listen to that voice that's in your heart. Listen to that inclination that comes from God. Listen to that desire that is more inspired than the competing desires, that urge that is more sacred than the other urges you might have at the moment, that goal that stands out above the others because it so clearly lines up with Christ's hopes. And as Jesus is teaching us what it means, it's no accident that he uses the question of mercy and kindness and charity. right? If we're going to listen way up, it's going to lead us to greater charity. And I'd ask you to notice the ways in which you've really lived out the Good Samaritan story. And below it, I'd ask you to notice, as every week this month, to notice this thing called interior freedom that enabled you to do that. So when's there been a time when you were kind to someone who had very few kind people in her or his life? Right? And it might be that you were kind to someone out there and they were sort of the odd man out at most social functions or in class or on your team, and you made it a point to include them. You didn't have to be their best friend, but you included them. That was a Good Samaritan deal. You were listening to that voice of the Lord. You were listening way up. We can't save the world, we know that. But we can respond to those people in front of us. We can listen way up when we're seeing this person on the road in front of us and say, gosh, I wonder what I should do. I know, I'll head for the hills. And that's not God's voice. So you've done that when you've included people who were at the edge. You've done that when you decided to really take primary responsibility for the health and well-being of a family member, right? Not everybody would have done that. Some people would have shied away. Some people would have crossed the street. Sorry, I'm really too busy to do this. And you climbed right in there and you listened to the voice of the Lord. You listened way up and you had interior freedom to do that. You didn't care about what other people were suggesting. You had the interior freedom to listen way up. You've done that at work. You've done that on your team. You've done that in your neighborhood. You've done it in 101 places. You listened way up, and there were the din of other voices that maybe said, you don't have to do this, it's not your job. Maybe even people said to you, now, don't worry about that. But you listened way up, and you loved, and you didn't count the cost. You toiled, and you didn't seek for rest. You labored, and you did not seek for reward, save that of knowing that you were doing what God wanted you to do. You've done this. So I'd ask you to notice the time, what's at the top of your list, a time when you really did listen way up, when convention and culture didn't say you should do this thing. Convention and culture said, walk to the other side of the street. But you walked right up to that person, and you included that person in your life. That took freedom, and it took listening way up. When have you done that very, very well? And what's that saying to you right now about perhaps a way in which the Lord is saying, can you keep doing that? Not for everybody. You can't save the world. Don't make yourself nuts over this thing. There's a pretty good chance there's someone out there, though, who, if not for you, would feel like they were lying on the side of the road and everybody walked away. Good for you, right? You didn't just listen. You didn't just listen up. You listened way up to the voice of God. You heeded the voice of the Lord. Good for you. Where have you gotten it really right in terms of exceptional charity? And where, maybe, just maybe, is the Lord saying, can you do that again in this person's life? So, it's about the competing noises in our lives, right? Those competing sounds, those competing voices, saying go this way, do that, do the other thing. And Moses reminds us of two things. A, it's not that hard. And the Vatican Council reaffirms that. It's in our hearts. And by virtue of our baptism, we have what it takes to understand it. We don't have to go to the sky or down into the sea. We can do this thing. We can listen way up and hear the voice of God. We can discern. And it's a really good thing to do. And when we discern, usually sane charity comes out of it. Not the kind of charity that says, I'm about to fix the whole world, but sane charity that says, I can't fix the whole world, but I can do what God wants in this moment. I can be the Good Samaritan, right? And you've done that. You know it. You've decided not to walk away from that person who needed a little bit extra TLC. And all sorts of reasons could have justified you going to the other side of the street, but you listened way up. You listened way up to that voice in your heart, oddly enough. And it said, no, do the right thing. And you did. And you've heard it before, and you'll hear it again. When have you really gotten it right? Listening way up and not crossing the street. Listening way up and being an instrument of God's charity because God loved that guy. And where might you be called to do that now? Stay cool. Let us pray.